Garrett in the tank on this one. And he's reaching for it. All in?
Oh my God.
He just went all in.
Hey everybody, this is Bart Hanson for Crush Live Poker, and I want to take a look at an incredible hand played between two of the superstars of Hustler Casino Live, Garrett and Andy, and these two definitely have a history of mixing it up. In this particular game, which was from September 28th of 2022, the game was playing crazy huge with the blinds of 100, 200, 400, 800, so 4 blinds and a $400 ante, creating $1,900 in dead money in the pot. Now, I have to interject here because I recorded this hand review right before all the things that went down at Hustler a couple weeks ago when I was out there last time to commentate. So I'm going to go over a couple of things. If you're not interested, you can just flip forward because the chapters are in the video. You know, I've gone back and forth with this, and this is probably going to be the absolute last time that I'm going to talk about this subject until more information comes out or until they complete their investigation. I went and did the first video, and I thought that there was probably about maybe a 75% chance of no cheating to 25% cheating. And then I did my update video where it came out that Brian had stolen chips from Robbie, and then I sort of leaned more towards like 50-50. And then in the last video, I said I leaned heavily towards cheating. Well, we're about a week later, and now I'm back to like 50-50. I really don't know. I just want to go over a couple of things here on both sides, and then we'll get right into the hand review. So the case for no cheating, and I'm trying to sum this up as quickly as possible because it's hard. There's a lot of information out there. The case for no cheating is there really has been no other evidence beyond conspiracy theories. There really hasn't been any other suspect hands. I mean, I really looked for any suspect hands. I haven't seen any. If they were cheating, why would they pick this particular hand to cheat when she wasn't that much of a favorite? And it would create such suspicion. If you were a cheater, would you give the money back? Also, no one has come forward and accepted the $250,000 bounty for more information that had an expiration date from several high-stakes poker players. Beginning player. Maybe she was just a beginning player and she called with Jack High. Robbie does say that she will press charges against Brian now after the fact. And Robbie came off really, really good on her last interview, I felt like, with Joey Ingram from a few days ago. And then, of course, she passed the lie detector, which was sort of the test of her choice. Now, the case for cheating, obviously the hand itself, which was just so crazy, right? How does somebody call with Jack High? Giving the money back to Garrett afterwards. The insider who had access, obviously, to see the live cards, stole the chips after the fact. The initial reaction to that was that she was not going to press charges. The questionable DM from Brian, right? Meaning where people have questioned if that was actually written by him. Likely untrue story about misreading hand. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can look it back in my last video. You will not convince me that she misread her hand there. I really do think that she thought she had Jack 4, which really doesn't necessarily help her case just because I think she's lying about that. Could she be lying about other things? No real history of play at that stakes. And then all of a sudden she just shows up. Shady characters, odd loaning and receiving of loans, that whole backstory, and sort of the disjointed, inconsistent stories from Robbie over the first few Joey interviews. But I will say that last interview that she did, I think she actually really did come off well. And the more time that sort of goes by when nothing else comes out and no one else comes forward, I think the more it looks better in her favor. But right now, I don't know. People have asked me, they've tried to pin me down, you know, with what my opinion is. And I just don't know. I think anybody that has more than, say, like an 80 or 85% stance on this either way, I think is going about thinking about the whole situation the wrong way, because I just don't think that anyone really can be that sure. And lastly here, I'll bring it back to Garrett, because I actually got a lot of heat in my second video, the update video, where I said I didn't really understand the move by Garrett to donate that money to charity, the $135,000 charity. And people were like, oh, well, he's just doing it just to show that he doesn't care about the money. And I said, we can't really be results oriented in this, even if cheating was found and you didn't agree with the method in which he handled the situation. What difference does it make if cheating was found or not? It doesn't change the way they handle the situation. And now, as the public perception has shifted more towards, in the last week, non-cheating, you see people jump back on the other way and say, oh, Garrett's mishandled this whole situation. So, it's just a lot of people just moving back and forth and not using logic. Again, I mean, I've been consistent since the entire time. I'm not a huge fan of the way that Garrett has handled this situation. Obviously, 100% believe that he thought that he was cheated. I don't know if he has more information that he hasn't provided to the public. It looks like he doesn't, because in all the statements he keeps putting out and the thing with 2+2, there's really no information. There's no information that he's giving. Now, in that post on 2+2, he sort of gave like a backstory. He gave some backstory about some of the shady characters, but no real like insider info that no one didn't already know. And then there was an article in the LA Times that just came out. I think it was yesterday. And again, he's just continuing to say double down, triple down. I just wonder if he's going to get into a situation where if nothing more comes out and there's nothing's found in the investigation, is he going to say have to give the money back to Robbie in addition to donating to charity if he ever wants to play on a live stream again? That's basically where we stand, but who knows if we'll ever see him back. So this might be one of the last big hands that we see him play.
I couldn't fit him in the poll. Did you see we got 10,000 votes?
10,000 votes. We got 10,000 votes, but we can't get 10,000 thumbs up. What's up with that?
Oh, man. I don't know about that. Andy has kings again.
8,000.
What is Garrett thinking with the king 5 off?
Cold 4-bet here coming. Uh-oh.
Oh, man.
This is the second time that Garrett has put a pre-flop raise in on Andy when Andy had kings. Remember, he did it with ace-queen earlier on.
He keeps reading Andy for weak when he's really strong. He's off his game a little bit tonight.
Yeah, he said it. You said it.
Andy's had kings 3 times tonight.
Right now, he is whatever meat is in between an Andy Stacks and Eric Person sandwich. It's not very often we see Garrett off his game, too. I mean, the guy is just a beast. Just crushes week after week, but he's human. And Andy, just like last time, just flats with kings.
So we started off here with JR raising it up on the button to 2,400, which is just 3 times the last blind, in this case, Garrett, who's the straddle. Now, I will say that sometimes in these extreme scenarios where there's multiple blinds, especially if you're not playing, say, 9-handed, I remember from Texas playing like 6 or 7-handed, when you're on the button, you're one of the first people to actually act. You can't just open a button range in that particular spot because unlike in a normal hand, there's a bunch of unseen hands left behind you, whereas 9-handed in a 2-blind structure, you've already seen 7 hands fold to you, not in this particular case. Now, you do have position over the field, but sometimes people open a little bit too loose. So he makes it 2,400. Now, Dustin makes a call here in the big blind. Remember, there's 4 blinds in this game, and this is a very, very troublesome spot because he's got Andy to his left and Garrett. And obviously those two are super aware. So anytime someone's going to actually flat, in this case, in between them and the blind, they were just absolutely ripe to be squeezed. And I think that's what kind of sets up the dynamic of this hand. But I would almost always be playing a 3-better fold strategy here out of Dustin's spot, even though these guys are super, super deep, 320 big blinds with the $800 straddle. Now, Andy actually picks up a real hand here. So he picks up pocket kings. So this is a spot, again, that's absolutely ripe for squeezing, but he's got a real hand. He actually takes somewhat of a, I would say, a little bit of a small sizing here. Well, he goes to 3.5x. Sometimes you'll see somebody go to 4x from out of position this deep, plus the dead money, make it something like 10, 12,000. He just decides to go to 8,000, which I think is a little bit small. And then it gets over here to Garrett. I got to tell you, I have probably seen Garrett play at least 1,000 hours on different live streams. This is literally the first time I've actually ever seen him get really out of line in a multi-bet scenario, especially like in a cold 4-bet pot. He has King 5 offsuit, and he's going to put in the cold 4-bet. And I think this really is a function of the fact that he thinks that Andy can be super light here when Dustin calls in between. It sort of just sets up that whole dynamic. So he's going to 4-bet it up here with position to 26,000. Now it's back around to Andy. And remember, these guys are playing super, super deep. So you don't always put the extra bet in here with kings. Yes, he's going to be out of position, but obviously they started with 300 and almost 50,000 here in this particular spot. Andy started with 337. So 320 big blinds deep. Sure, sometimes you can put in the 5-bet, but a lot of players in live poker don't really have that much of a 5-betting range because normally you're not all that deep. So it actually doesn't really surprise me that Andy just ends up making the call here. And, the theory goes you put in the extra bet with pocket aces and sometimes ace king suited to balance that out. So we end up going to the flop here, heads up in a $57,300 pot.
And gets a beautiful flop for his hands.
Garrett's really forcing it here with the king 5 offsuit.
That's 15,000 in the 57.
Yeah, he's probably going to go small bet, big bet.
And then be done with it again?
I think so.
So the flop comes out Jack 7-7 rainbow. And of course, Andy is going to sort of auto check it over here to Garrett. This is a little interesting spot here in terms of sizing because it's such an extreme configuration. Neither player really should have all that many 7x. And when that's the case, and Garrett would cold 4-bet with Jack. He has basically a nut advantage here for the most part, meaning he probably has more aces and kings than Andy. So you're allowed to take a larger sizing here. This is not just like a single raise pot against, say, like the big blind who's defending where you have to worry about a 7. But he actually chooses to take a smaller sizing here between 25 and 30% of the pot, which he most likely can do with his entire range. In 4-bet pots, on all but the most connected types of boards, you can really c-bet a very, very wide range for small sizing as a continuation bet, and that's exactly what he does. It kind of simplifies the strategy a little bit. So he goes for 15,000, and for the most part this deep, I'm not surprised here that Andy does just call. Once in a while you can throw in some raises for protection, but being out of position and the pot getting super, super bloated up here, not having Jack, not having ace, he just ends up making the call.
By the way, Garrett can't win this pot. If you're wondering why he can't catch running 5s, our graphics take into account folded cards, the dead cards.
All right, just gives up.
So the turn here is the 3 of diamonds, puts a backdoor diamond draw out there, and Andy's going to pretty much check here 100% of the time after check calling. This is kind of interesting here from Garrett because he used such a small sizing on the flop. It means that Andy is going to be forced to defend somewhat wide, and I would expect him with a fair amount of frequency to actually double barrel this turn. It is a disconnected turn card. It's not like an 8, a 9, or a 10. And if you lay the hammer down here on the turn, you force a lot of ace high types of holdings to fold out. And you start to make pairs, say between like 4s and 6s, kind of indifferent to calling when they don't really pick up anything on the turn. So I was a little bit surprised here to see Garrett check it back. Of course, you can play a delayed double barrel, and what that means is check back at the turn on what is naturally a good card for you to sort of see what your opponent does and possibly bluff the river if they check to you again from up front.
Andy checking a third time.
I don't know what Garrett's plan was this hand. Not sure he had one.
No, let's find out right now. First part of the plan might have been, I'm going to 4-bet and win it right now. That didn't work.
Yeah, but what was the 15K bet all about?
Setting up a big play here, maybe?
Adding 1 minute.
Garrett in the tank on this one. And he's reaching for it. All in?
Oh, my God.
He just went all in. He just bet $296,000 into a pot of 87. That's the plan.
To go small bet, check back, all
Bomb.
in if a jack comes. The jack of diamonds.
Adding 1 minute.
Just give her all the time chips now.
This is a pure leveling spot. These two have a ton of history.
Yeah, Andy, once again, much stronger than he's represented, but
Yeah,
at this point, Kings are just a bluff catcher, right?
Oh, they're just a bluff catcher,
Yeah.
of course. And this bet doesn't make sense for value on level 1. But these guys are playing on a different level. So much history.
Right. Recreational can look at this and go, well, if you had a jack, why would you bet so much? Right? But that's level 1. What a spot. Garrett bets $296,000 into 87.
So the river rolls off here, the jack of diamonds completing a backdoor flush. And I wonder if Andy was fully expecting to value bet a lot of clean rivers, but here he decides to check. And I don't really blame him. I mean, I think he could use a block type of sizing here to possibly try to get called by ace high, 25, 30,000, something like that. The problem with that, though, is that if you get a good player in position, he can really snuff that out and put you in a very difficult spot. Now, remember, with a block bet at the end, you have to get called by worse, but it's quite possible that Garrett might call with ace high here. Now, the interesting part here is now it's over to Garrett. And how many jacks does Garrett have here in this spot? It's possible he might have a jack some of the time checking this back. I don't think at the time that Garrett had any idea how strong Andy was. But I do think that he thought that he had to, for example, bet off ace high, get a guy off of 8s, 9s, 10s, something like that. But I don't think I've ever seen this type of sizing used before. This was like a 3.2x pot all in. Really an absolutely incredible bet size here. 3.4x times the pot going all in for 296. And what that ends up doing is it gives Andy really horrible pot odds. He's only getting about 1.3 to 1, which means he needs to be about 43.5% of the time to make the call here. I mean, what a ballsy move here. But I actually think that Garrett probably misread the situation. I mean, it's possible he might have thought that Andy had a hand as weak as queens, but I really do think that this bet was trying to get a qualifying pair. And I remember small pairs don't play here because obviously jacks and sevens are double paired on the board, but Garrett can't just check this back and allow ace high to win. So he decides to take this huge overbet sizing and quite possibly try to get everything that's a pair between 8s and queens to fold. I think one of the other things too is that Andy, after watching him for many years, might be a little bit unbalanced in this spot where I rarely will see him check a jack here from up front, and Garrett might have picked up on that. Now, when he gets back over to Andy, boy, he's in quite the predicament because obviously his hand is extremely under-repped. But what I will say in terms of pattern recognition about Garrett is that normally against good players, he tends to, I would say, give up a lot more than against bad players. And what I mean by that is that he doesn't run crazy bluffs on cards that he's not supposed to against who he deems as a good player. And there was even a hand earlier on in this particular session where Garrett had cold 3-bet Andy with ace queen and bet flop and bet turn, and then just gave up on the end. And Andy won with kings. That was another hand that Andy had with kings. So going into this, Andy might think that Garrett doesn't pull the trigger on a huge bluff against good players. And then Garrett actually might also think from watching Andy a bunch that he overfolds rivers, because Andy will sometimes really make some big hero folds in given spots. I've actually gone over them a few times here on this channel. So you have this dynamic where Garrett usually gives up on this spot. Andy usually overfolds. So Garrett decides to just go for it, obviously trying to get ace high out and some of the other pairs. And Andy knows that Garrett so rarely bluffs against a good player in this spot. It just gets into this very tough situation, especially with Andy really not getting great pot odds at all. Now, if I were in this situation, would I call or not? I mean, sometimes you just have to sort of go back to baseline. And if your opponent is capable of running a bluff in a given scenario, you have to call down here with some hands. And another thing that can easily be washed over here, and it's in the heat of the moment, but what I like to teach people over at Crush Live Poker in terms of hand reading is to go back to pre-flop. If you go back and you're in Andy's spot here, you have to sort of recognize the situation where it looks like you're in a squeeze spot. Because remember, JR open, then we have this dude calling in the big blind. We look like we're squeezing. So that could certainly open up Garrett's cold 4-betting range because of the dead money. And I think, like I said, the problem for Andy is I don't know how protected his checking range here is. I just think that he bets a lot with Jack X. Now, maybe that's not correct in theory. I'm just telling you the pattern recognition that I've found out. So if he bets in general, if he sort of sees himself betting a lot here with Jack X and he then checks at the end, then he has to call down with some hands. And this is basically like one of the best hands he can possibly call down with, because he probably isn't going to have aces because he would put in the extra bet. And of course, this is assuming that he's not going to really have that much 7x, maybe once in a while if he 3-bets and defends to the 4-bet with ace-7 suited or 8-7 suited, he might have a 7 here that he checks. But if he's not checking much Jack X here, then this is really going to be one of the best hands that he can call down with. So I think he really needs to sort of close his eyes and call, but it's obviously very easy for us to be Monday morning quarterbacks.
Just to refresh how we
And
got
he
here.
folds.
And he folds.
Unbelievable. Best hand I've ever seen on this show.
That was awesome.
Just pure aggression.
Yeah. You said, Garrett, what's your plan? You know what? I'm just gonna put more money in there than he's comfortable calling. That's it. That's my only plan. I know you don't have a jack, and I'm just gonna bet an amount that I know you don't want to call.
On the 8.
Just beast mode.
And when I watched this back, I was amazed too. Just like Tuckman and DGAF said, I was not expecting Andy to fold there. Usually Garrett is not that out of line. First of all, just cold 4-betting with garbage, and then taking this line, betting small, not double barreling, and then just following up with this massive overbet for real money. It was just one of the more entertaining hands that I've ever seen on Hustler Casino Live. Do me a favor, if you liked what you see here, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and a little announcement. I will be coming back to LA, and I will be playing in the game on October 20th on Thursday night, the ante-game. And then on Friday, I am commentating Alan Keating's return with Phil Hellmuth. And Phil Hellmuth claims he's not going to min buy. And most of the guys from the All In podcast, and I'm a big fan of their podcast, Jason Calacanis, Shamath Palihapitiya, David Friedberg. I do not believe that David Sachs is going to be there, but it's going to be one hell of a game. So I look forward to seeing you all in the chat.